Hey everybody, welcome back to Football Talk with Vinny. In today's video, we're going to be recapping week 1. So what I'm going to try to do throughout the season is just kind of go over the week's games and just my thoughts on each individual game. And I don't want the video to be too long, so I'm not going to go super in-depth, just kind of give you some thoughts on the games themselves. And obviously with a new segment, it may change as the weeks go by, as I get, more comfortable with how I want to do these videos. So let's just start with the very first game. Obviously, the Dallas Cowboys played the Bucs. No one gave Dallas a chance, but at the end of the game, Dallas had the lead, but unfortunately, he gave Brady a little bit too much time. Minute 24 on the clock with 2 timeouts. That's too much time for Tom Brady. Now, in terms of the game, though, I did like the way the Dallas Cowboys offense played. Again, still the Bucs do have a pretty good defense. So for Dak to do what he did against the Bucs secondary is pretty good, especially Dak's first game back. So at least now as a Cowboys fan, moving forward, you really have no concerns with Dak and his injury. Dak was 42 of 58, 403 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. Zeke really didn't get much going, just 11 carries for 33 yards, but you did play the number 1 run D in the league. So, that's to be expected. Some games you're just not going to have it, and especially when you go up against the elite defenses. Tom Brady did what Brady does, right? 32 of 50, 379 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 2 picks. And of course, both picks, not really his fault. One was tipped from a screen pass from Leonard Fournette. The other was just a Hail Mary at the end of the half. So Brady played phenomenal like he always does. Their ground game didn't get much going either. Leonard Fournette had 9 carries for 32 yards. As a team, they had 52 rushing yards total. From the Bucs perspective, obviously expected to win that game. So I think the fact that it was closer than they thought it would be, the fact that you got a win out of it, I think is good because, a lot of those times where you kind of underestimate your opponent, you usually lose those games, and then that's what causes you to maybe not get as high a seed as you would have gotten had you gotten some of those wins. So to get the win there, I think was great. Next week, they may be even better, especially on the defensive side of the ball after the game that they just played. But from the Cowboys' perspective, and we'll go over the rest of the teams in the NFC East in a minute, I really like Dallas' chances to win the division, even though they lost. They played very well against arguably probably the best team in the NFC. So I think just the way that they played, especially offensively against a good defense, I think Dallas is going to be able to put up a bunch of points on almost every team. And although the secondary didn't play well against Tom Brady and that Bucs offense, the run defense played exceptional to kind of shut down and limit the Bucs running game. And again, there's so many weapons in Tampa. I don't know if Dallas is going to play another team with as many weapons as the Bucs had in week 1. And then obviously for the Sunday games, in no particular order, we'll start with the Eagles and the Falcons. Obviously the Eagles crushed them 32-6, but the game was actually relatively close. So in that game, it was 15-6 with about 3 minutes to go in the third quarter. So it was a relatively close game, and then Philly scored on, I think it was 4 straight possessions, a couple touchdowns, a couple field goals, kind of put the game out of reach at that point. From Eagles fans, though, you have to like the way that Jalen Hurts played in his first game. He was 27 of 35, 264 yards, and 3 TDs, and no interceptions. So a very clean game from Jalen Hurts. Sanders had 15 carries for 74 yards. But on the other end, with Matt Ryan, I was really shocked at how bad he played, because I don't think the Philly defense is, it's not a top-notch defense. So to get kind of shut down like he did was really surprising. Matt Ryan's numbers were 21 of 35, 164 yards, and no touchdowns. No interceptions, but to throw 164 yards for Matt Ryan has got to be one of his career worst games. Next, we'll go over the Bills and Steelers. Obviously, with that game, the Bills were able to take a 10-point lead at halftime, scored a touchdown at the end of the half, and then the second half was a completely different game with the Pittsburgh Steelers scoring, I think it was 23 unanswered points, or maybe it was 20 unanswered points. Then Buffalo got a field goal. Pittsburgh got a field goal, and then Buffalo got a field goal, and then that was the final score of the game. If you watch the game, Josh Allen definitely looked like he was kind of out of it for pretty much the whole game. Not out of it in the terms of didn't want to play, just kind of like out of sync. They only had really the one half in the preseason, which I think that's a theme of week 1. With a lot of teams not really even deciding to play any of their starters. You are going to have some teams that just come out on fire, but some teams are going to be a little bit slow to start because of the lack of preseason. I think Josh Allen's a perfect example. He missed Emmanuel Sanders on a wide open deep ball that, especially the way Josh Allen played last year, he normally will make those throws. And if he makes a throw like that, it could be 17-0 at half, not 10. And that obviously puts Pittsburgh in a much different situation, being down 3 scores as opposed to 2. Even though they got the ball to start the second half, if they were down 17 instead of 10, they may have decided to go for it on 4th down in that first possession instead of kick the field goal and only be down 7. Kicking a field goal there would put them down 14 still. So who knows? If they go for it there, don't get it, maybe it's a completely different ball game. Quickly go over the numbers. Josh Allen was 30 for 51, 270 yards, and 1 touchdown. Singletary, the running back, actually played pretty well. 11 carries for 72 yards. If you look at the way Buffalo played, especially during the postseason last year, they almost just stopped running the ball. So against a good Pittsburgh defense, they actually were able to run it pretty effectively, which is so surprising why Josh Allen was kind of bad. Big Ben, 18 of 32, 188, and 1 touchdown, no interceptions. So Big Ben actually didn't play that well. Obviously, he had the blocked punt for a touchdown, a couple of drives here and there, but for the most part, it was a defensive game for sure. Next, we're going to go over the Bengals and the Vikings. So at this game, both offenses started a little slow in that first half. Obviously, again, with the lack of preseason play, again, some offenses were just going to have to need a week or two to kind of get back in sync. But with these two teams specifically, really only just took a half in that second half. Both offenses looked much better than they had in the first half. Obviously, with the Vikings, they committed, I believe, 12 penalties for 116 yards. And then obviously with this one, they were driving. If you're Minnesota, they had 2 great drives at the end of the game. One was to force overtime, and the other one was in overtime. Unfortunately, Dalvin Cook fumbled, I believe, at about the 35-yard line where they were about to be in field goal range. And then Cincinnati takes over, gets a couple first downs, puts himself in field goal range, and wins the game. But again, both offenses played pretty well. If you look at the stats, Kirk Cousins was 36 of 49, 351, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions, so pretty good game out of him. Dalvin Cook was 20 carries for 61 yards, but also added another 6 receptions for 43 yards, so overall had a very good day. Whereas Joe Burrow was more efficient, didn't throw it as many. He was 20 of 27, 261, still 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. So Joe Burrow was more efficient, where Kirk Cousins had to actually do more because he was behind most of the game. And then lastly, just Joe Mixon's stats, with 29 carries, 127 yards, and 1 TD. Next, we're going to go over the 49ers and Detroit Lions. With this game, early in the third quarter, it was 38-10. It looked like it was going to be a rout. Obviously, with the way just the two teams are, everyone expects the Niners to be very good, and everyone expects the Detroit Lions to be one of the worst teams in the league. So when it was 38-10, you figured, okay, that's the kind of game you thought it was going to be based on the two teams. But give Jared Goff some credit and that offense for Detroit. They were able to mount a comeback and make a couple of scores and actually give themselves a chance down 8 with the ball with about a minute and a half to go. It was about 40-50 seconds they had. Some of the stats for the quarterbacks and running backs was Jimmy G was 17 for 25, 314 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. So a pretty decent game from Jimmy G. It's a lot of yards. Obviously, Raheem Mostert went down. He's actually going to be out for a few weeks. Elijah Mitchell actually came in and played very well. He had 19 carries for 104 yards and a TD on the ground. And then again, like I said, for the Detroit Lions, Jared Goff played surprisingly well against a pretty good defense. He was 38 of 57, 338 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception. All right, next up is the Cardinals and Tennessee Titans. Obviously, if you saw my prediction video, this looks terrible for the prediction of Tennessee actually making it out of the AFC. They looked absolutely bad on really both sides of the ball in this game. You definitely want to give Arizona a lot of credit. They definitely came in ready to play, and you could tell that the Tennessee Titans really just weren't ready to play offensively and defensively, right? Tannehill missed some throws. Derrick Henry really couldn't get it going in the first half. And then on defense, they just couldn't stop Kyler Murray. I think a lot of teams are going to have trouble with that. Very shocked at the way Tennessee's offense played. Obviously, when you have a guy like Chandler Jones who had 5 sacks in the game from one individual player, that can single-handedly ruin an offense for sure. And then just with that fumble early in that first quarter that led to that first touchdown, you kind of put yourself behind a little bit. And Tennessee is an offense that it's kind of tough to play from behind because you rely so heavily on the run game. Not only just the fact that Derrick Henry is so good, but that run game sets up the play-action pass, which is what gives Tannehill the easy throws. So I think They're an offense that when they're behind, because Tannehill's not a special quarterback, he's just a good quarterback, it's tough for good quarterbacks and average quarterbacks to kind of play from behind, because now you're having to do, things that they don't ask him to do on a regular basis, which is to win a football game, right? It's much different like with the Dallas Cowboys when you ask Dak to throw it 55 times and he has to win you a ball game. It's much different than when, if you're Tennessee, if Tannehill throws it 25, 30 times, but they were able to give it to Derrick Henry 25, 30 times. Tannehill's not asked to win a ball game. He's just asked to throw it to the open receiver when the play action, and those plays are there to be made. Obviously, from Arizona's perspective, huge win, really from both sides. Again, offensively and defensively, just dominated both sides of the ball. So Kyler Murray was 21 of 32, 289 yards, 4 TDs and a pick. Also had another rushing touchdown. Both of the backs for Arizona were pretty decent. Edmonds had 12 carries for 63 yards, and Connor had 16 carries for 53 yards. So pretty effective on the ground. With the Tennessee Titans, they did kind of settle down a little bit in the second half, but again, they were already getting blown out at that point, so their stats look okay, but again, a lot of that's in garbage time. So Tannehill finished 21 of 35, 212 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Derrick Henry finished for 17 carries for 58 yards. Obviously, for me, I want to more focus in on the Julio Jones one, because like I said, the reason why I kind of picked the Tennessee Titans to come out of the AFC, I thought that Julio Jones is maybe even still a top 5, but definitely a top 10 receiver. He obviously did not look like it in week 1. Again, it is early in the season. You don't want to really jump to conclusions after just one game. There is 16 now left to go before you even get into the postseason. So obviously we'll see how the continuity works between him and Ryan Tannehill over the next couple of weeks. I think for any offense, when you are getting your quarterback hit as often as Ryan Tannehill was getting hit in that first half, it's hard to move the ball for any offense. It's why the pass rushers are usually the highest paid defensive player, is because when they can pressure the quarterback like Chandler Jones did specifically, right, it kind of wrecks the entire offense. But definitely after week 1, that prediction looks horrible, but we'll see moving forward how that turns out. We'll see how Tennessee plays in the next couple of weeks, so we'll definitely keep an eye out on them. Next game quickly to go over is going to be the Seattle Seahawks and Indianapolis Colts. Obviously with Seattle, Russell Wilson looked like his normal self, super efficient today. He finished 18 for 23, so only 5 incompletions, but still threw for 254 yards in those 18 attempts. He threw for 254 yards in those 18 completions for 4 touchdowns and no interceptions. Chris Carson was pretty good on the ground as well, 16 carries for 91 yards. And then for the 2 star receivers for Seattle, obviously Tyler Lockett had a big day, 4 catches, 100 yards, 2 scores. DK Metcalf had a pretty okay day himself, 4 catches for 60 yards and a touchdown. For Indianapolis, in terms of their offense, I think again, when you go up against Russell Wilson, they put up a lot of points, so it kind of puts pressure on the Colts. And again, I think the Colts are more of a run-first team, so any team that's built kind of with the run-first mentality, if they get down big, it kind of takes them out of their game plan, so their offense can't be as effective as they want it to be. But looking at the stats, Carson Wentz was 25 of 38, 251, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Jonathan Taylor had 17 carries for 56 yards, and Hines had another 9 carries for 34 yards. So overall, when you look at the numbers, they don't look too bad. But again, I think when you're not able to play your game and when you're getting blown out, which is what Seattle kind of just put pressure on them by scoring a lot of touchdowns early, again, it kind of takes you out of your game plan and you're not able to play the way you really want to play. So even though the numbers don't look too bad, I think the Colts offense could be significantly better had they been in the ball game if their defense was able to get some stops early. Next, we're going to go over the Washington football team and the Chargers. For this game, obviously, it was a top 5 offense against a top 5 defense. It certainly was a good game to watch. If you watch the game, Justin Herbert obviously drove down for the very first drive. Then they got a couple of stops. That Washington defense was able to get a couple stops early. And then it's kind of in that second half, the Chargers offense started to move the ball a little bit, get some scores early. And then at the end of the game, when they needed to stay on the field in order to win, the Chargers got several key first downs to kind of ice the game. Obviously, another unfortunate injury with Ryan Fitzpatrick. He did get hurt. He's probably going to be out for several weeks. There's news that, I think it's just hype, that maybe potentially Cam Newton may be picked up. And obviously, you can see the logic behind it. because the coach is Ron Rivera, who obviously coached Cam Newton in Carolina. But in terms of the stats for both of the teams, some of the key players, you had Justin Herbert, who went 31 of 47, 337 yards, a touchdown, and a pick, which I think is very good against the defense that they kind of went up against. Austin Eckler, 15 carries for 57 yards, so a pretty decent day considering you're going up against a D-line as good as Washington's. Both Keenan Allen and Mike Williams had very good days. Keenan Allen, 9 receptions, 100 yards, and Mike Williams, 8 receptions for 82 yards and a touchdown. Right, for Washington, obviously, with Fitzpatrick went down after about 6 attempts, so Heineke was a starter. He played pretty well, 11 for 15, 122 yards and a touchdown. Again, they don't ask any of the quarterbacks for Washington to do too much because you know you're going to be in every game based on your defense. Antonio Gibson had a pretty good day, 20 carries for 90 yards. Next, we're going to go with the Jets and Panthers, obviously with that game being a final of 19-14. Again, this was Sam Darnold going back up against his old team. And I think Sam played pretty well. Again, as you guys know on this channel, I'm a big believer that Sam Darnold is a pretty good quarterback. Again, not great, but he is good enough to where I think you can make the playoffs with him. And again, if you watched my NFC predictions video, I do think Carolina is going to make the playoffs. We'll obviously see how that works out as the season goes on. So Sam Darnold played okay. I thought he would actually play a little better. He was 24 of 35, 279 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Of course, he had that 1 rushing touchdown at the goal line. So again, finished with 2 total scores for 280 yards passing. He did what he needed to do in order to get a win. And again, when you have so many weapons around you, right, you don't have to be as special. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey is the star of that offense, and he had 21 carries for 98 yards. Also was their leading catcher with 9 receptions for another 89 yards. So again, he almost put up 200 yards. I do think, though, after watching the game, you kind of go away with the feeling that both teams are kind of happy with the guys they have that are starting quarterbacks. Because with the Jets, although they lost the game, Zach Wilson clearly looks like he's going to be a very talented quarterback in this league. Right? He looks like he probably is going to potentially be a better quarterback than Sam Darnold could potentially be as well. Again, both quarterbacks are young, they're still growing. But it looks like Zach Wilson has the potential to be a better, just overall starting quarterback. And for a team like the Jets, they are still in rebuild mode for probably another 1 to 2 years. So again, at that point, you'd rather have just a younger guy that maybe has the higher upside. And I think if you're Carolina, they have a better roster overall. So I think having the quarterback like Sam Darnold is good for them too, because it's a slight upgrade, I think, over a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, which I guess we'll get to in a second in the Denver Broncos game. I think it's more the big play potential that a guy like Sam Darnold gives you that Teddy just doesn't give you. So next, we'll go over the Jags and Texans. Obviously, with this game, it's one of the bigger shockers of the week, with the Texans actually just completely blowing them out 37-21. The game wasn't even as close as the final score because they were up significantly more than the 16 points that the game ended at. And now with the game and statistics-wise, Trevor Lawrence did throw for 3 touchdowns, but also had 3 interceptions. He was 28 of 51 and also added in 332 yards. In a game where he threw a couple of his picks early, they got down pretty big. Again, that Jacksonville defense looked terrible. They just allowed the Houston Texans to kind of just drive right all over them, right down the field, get a lot of quick scores early, which then puts pressure on a rookie quarterback making his first start in a game. You're getting blown out and you have to throw 51 times. Things are usually not going to end well for that team. So again, he still showed some good positive plays, obviously some big plays as well, but again, had some mistakes. Again, he's a rookie, he's going to have those. And I think with the way Jacksonville's team is, they're probably not going to win that many ball games, but again, that's not what their actual goal is of the season. I think their goal is just to improve and get better as a football team. They have a lot of young players on that roster, so I don't think whether they finish with 4 to 6, 7 wins, I don't think it matters, the win total specifically. It just matters if you see improvement over the rookies over the course of the long season. Now for Houston, though. This kind of reminds me of actually what Jacksonville did last year. If you remember, Jacksonville finished the season 1-15, but they actually won their opening game in week 1 against the Indianapolis Colts, who actually went on to make the playoffs. Now, the reason why this reminds me of that team is because the entire offseason last year, right, we were talking about how bad Jacksonville was going to be, and is there going to be a fire sale, and how terrible this team is going to be. Well, you fast forward that to this year's offseason, it was the exact same thing, just with the Houston Texans. It's going to be a fire sale there. If you trade Deshaun Watson, they're going to be the worst team in the league. They may be winless this season, right? And again, you have 53 men on that roster that heard all that all offseason long, how bad they were going to be and how they can't win a game without Deshaun Watson and how bad their offense is going to look without Deshaun. I think those players kind of just said to themselves, okay, NFL world, watch this. At the end of the year, I could still see the Texans losing 13, 14 games, right? This could be just that one miraculous game that they played. Who knows? I could be wrong. They could win 4, 5, 6 games this season. I think Jacksonville, very young team, they probably just took the Texans for granted, thought it was going to be a rollover game, even though it's week 1, the season just started. I think, again, like everyone thought the Texans were going to be so bad. I think a young team like Jacksonville kind of just, overlooked them and said, okay, this is going to be a cakewalk. We're going to blow these boys out. Somehow I don't think their next opponent is going to overlook them as much as Jacksonville did. Next, we'll go to the Chiefs and Browns, and obviously with that one, the Chiefs pulling out late victory, 33-29. Obviously in the first half, Cleveland looked very, very good. So with Cleveland's offense in the first half, they were able to really just move the ball kind of at will. Obviously with that ground game, it does open up a lot of the pass attempts in terms of with play actions. And I really like the way they played offensively, just very aggressive, right? After the very first score, they decided to go for 2 when they were up 6-0, right? You really understood from Cleveland's perspective, they knew going into Kansas City, they're going to have to put up a lot of points in order to win. And obviously it looked like they were kind of, on track to win up until midway, up until the fourth quarter. I think Cleveland had a nice drive. They scored a touchdown to go up 29-20, right? So they're up about 9 points with 10 minutes to go in the ball game, and you're thinking, okay, well, even if Kansas City makes a long drive here, if you're Cleveland, you would still going to have the lead, and all your offense has to do is run the ball, get a couple first downs, and you're going to win the ball game. But unfortunately, what happens is the absolute worst case scenario for Cleveland is you give up a 75-yard touchdown in one play. So now you still have 10 minutes to go, and now you're in a 2-point ball game. If you're Cleveland, that's what you absolutely could not afford to have, right? If they went on a 10-play, 6-minute drive, you would take that at that point, because now there'd be 4 minutes left. You'd be up to getting the ball. All you have to do is get a couple first downs, and you can ice this game. But unfortunately, when you have the backbreaker plays like that, and I get it, it's Kansas City, that's kind of what they do. If you're Cleveland, that obviously was the worst case scenario for you on that specific play and in that drive. And then from there, Cleveland just made a bunch of mistakes, obviously with the punter fumbling the snap and obviously giving Kansas City a short field, which turned that into a touchdown, which now gave them the actual lead. And then Baker obviously made his really only big mistake at the end of the game, trying to drive down for a game-winning touchdown, and obviously made a bad decision and threw an interception. So with the box score, some of the numbers for the quarterbacks and running backs are Baker was 21 of 28, 321 yards, no touchdowns and an interception. Nick Chubb, again, was very efficient, 15 carries for 83 yards. Kareem Hunt had a couple carries, 6 of them for 33 yards. So again, no gaudy numbers. They were just able to kind of move the ball. A bunch of receivers had a bunch of receptions and some yards. No one really stood out there. Patrick Mahomes played how Patrick Mahomes plays, right? 27 of 36, 337, 3 TDs, no interceptions. No interceptions, very clean game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 14 carries for 43 yards. Not great, but if you're looking at long term, he was the back that really got almost all of the carries. The next guy had 5 carries, and that was actually Patrick Mahomes. They had a couple other guys get 1 carry apiece. So they are really all in on Clyde Edwards-Helaire as being the actual main predominant back there. Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce both had great games. Tyreek Hill obviously with that 75-yard touchdown kind of inflates the numbers a bit, but even without that, he still had a fantastic game. He finishes with 11 catches, 197 yards, and 1 score. Travis Kelce, 6 catches, 76 yards, 2 scores. Normal, typical Travis Kelce game. I do think, though, after the game, if you're Cleveland, kind of like with the Dallas Cowboys losing to the Bucs, you kind of feel like, hey, this is the best that the NFC has if you're Dallas, and this is the best that the AFC has if you're Cleveland. And you really kind of leave that game thinking, you know what, if we see them in the playoffs, we could beat this team, right? They had a 9-point lead with 10 minutes to go. If they had just made Kansas City have to drive on them instead of getting a 75-yard bomb, I think the game might have ended differently. Now we'll go to the Miami Dolphins and New England Patriots. This game, kind of as expected, both defenses were very good. You have two young quarterbacks who kind of played okay at some times and also had some bad plays as well. Obviously, with the final score, Dolphins winning at 17-16. Damian Harris for New England actually had a critical fumble when they were driving to get a game-winning touchdown or even field goal at that point. So that's obviously a backbreaker. That's a turnover you really can't afford with under about 4 minutes to go, I believe, in the ball game. So Tua played pretty well. Obviously, he's going to have a lot more pressure on him this year. You have more weapons. Again, you don't have that backup in Fitzpatrick that you can put in. So again, he's just going to have to play better. And I think week one, it was a tough test. New England does have a very good defense. I think he played pretty well. He finished the game 16 of 27, 202 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. So not great, but again, when you're up against an elite defense, he played decent. Mac Jones, actually, I was more surprised at how he played. Again, rookie making his first start. He was 29 of 39, so he threw it almost 40 times in his very first career start. He finished with 281 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. So to throw it 40 times and not throw an interception, I think that's shows obviously why Bill Belichick, chose to go with him over Cam Newton. But I think both teams, obviously, they're going to be fighting for the playoffs all year. Obviously, with Buffalo losing week one, I think both teams think they might have a chance at the division. I think Buffalo kind of just had a bad week one. I do still think they can get to 13, 14 wins. So next we'll go over the Green Bay Packers and the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, this is the biggest shocker of the week, with the Saints absolutely destroying them 38-3. Aaron Rodgers looked really bad. He was 15 for 28, 133 yards, no touchdowns, 2 picks, with a 13.4 quarterback rating. They obviously couldn't get anything going on the ground as well, as they were getting blown out of the game, so you kind of just abandoned the run at that point. And then on the other side with Jameis Winston, this is as efficient as it gets. 14 of 20, 148 yards, but still threw for 5 TDs. Kamara was his normal self, 20 carries, 83 yards. Only added 3 receptions for 8 yards though. This one is up there for one of the worst takes for myself, along with Tennessee coming out of the AFC after week one. Again, if you watch the NFC video for the predictions, I predicted that the Saints would not make the playoffs. That looks absolutely ridiculous now. The way their team played, I thought that without Drew Brees, their offense would come down a little bit. And who knows, it's just week one, but their defense looks so dominant that it doesn't even matter if their defense comes back a little bit or if their offense comes back down a little bit. It doesn't even matter because their defense looked like it could be a top 5 defense this year. And to do that against Green Bay, I understand Aaron Rodgers didn't have a lot of offseason because of his decision to not want to be with the Packers and potentially, debate retirement, and obviously wanted to be on a new team. But again, once the game starts, Aaron Rodgers is still Aaron Rodgers. Like, when you're a quarterback that's been in that system for like 3 years now, and also he's been a quarterback for 16, 17 years in the NFL, you don't need as much practice in the offseason to come in and play well. Sure, you need it, but again, most of his receivers have been there for several years now. He already has continuity with them. I think it was more give credit to the New Orleans Saints defense for how they played. Like Aaron Rodgers said a couple seasons ago, everyone just relax, right? They get Detroit next week. I think that might be a route. I think Aaron Rodgers is going to really want to show everyone that, hey, it was just an aberration game. He's still that dude. So I think if you're Green Bay, you don't want to overreact to one game. Again, I think the same for New Orleans. You don't want to overreact to this one as well. We'll see how well the team plays next week. But after week one, obviously that prediction of the Saints not being in the playoffs looks absolutely horrible. So we got 3 more games to finish out with. We got the Denver Broncos and the New York Giants. Obviously with that game, Teddy Bridgewater did his normal stuff. Very efficient, making sure he gets completions, no negative plays, no turnovers. And against a pretty good defense too. The Giants were pretty good on defense last year as well. Teddy Bridgewater was 28 of 36, 264 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. The running game, I think, really struggled. I think if you look at the overall numbers, it doesn't look that way. Melvin Gordon had 11 carries for 101 yards. Javonte Williams had 14 carries for 45 yards. But again, Melvin Gordon had a 70-yard touchdown run at the end of the game to kind of break the game open. You take that 170-yard carry away, they had about 27 carries for about 100 yards. So not super efficient with those statistics, just decent. Obviously with Jerry Jeudy, he went down as well. He may be out multiple weeks, so I think that's going to hurt their offense. But again, you do have a lot of weapons still, so I think Teddy Bridgewater can still get it done. I just think it's really unfortunate situation. Again, injuries are part of the game, but having Jerry Jeudy with Courtland Sutton and Noah Fant and KJ Hamler, that's a lot of weapons. So when you miss one, it kind of makes defenses breathe a sigh of relief that it's one less weapon you have to guard now. For the Giants, unfortunately, another lackluster performance, especially on the offensive side. I think Daniel Jones played pretty well considering he's going up against a pretty good defense. I think Denver will be pretty good on the defensive side of the ball this year. He was 22 of 37, 267 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions. Obviously had the costly fumble. Saquon Barkley, obviously extremely disappointing, 10 carries, 26 yards. They did clear him the day before to play, so obviously I don't think he was going to get too many snaps. And then having a short week this week on Thursday night, he may not see a lot of snaps as well. They may put Booker in. And I think as the season goes on, if Barkley can get involved in the offense more, I think it'll help their overall offense. The line didn't look great, right? Daniel Jones didn't have as much protection. When he did, you saw him make a lot of big throws. I think I'm a supporter of Daniel Jones. I think he's a very good quarterback. Again, if you're in an offense that just doesn't block or has no pass catchers, it's hard to be successful, right? And I think they now have the pass catchers. They just have to work on the O-line. And if Saquon keeps getting carries and he meets 2-3 guys in the backfield and he's got to break 2 or 3 tackles just to get to the line of scrimmage, it's difficult for any running back to succeed. You got the Sunday night game was the Rams and Bears. Obviously with the Rams, they looked like they were firing on all cylinders. Obviously the game was close early, kind of a blowout late. But again, Stafford was tremendous. The offense was very good. Defensively, again, like I said, even though they lost some guys, I do still think they can finish as a top 10, maybe potentially top 5 defense. They still have 2 of the best defensive players in the league on their roster. I think against a defense as good as the Rams, I don't think their offense played as bad as we maybe think they played, right? Andy Dalton was pretty efficient. He was 27 of 38, 206 yards, and a pick. Obviously, that red zone turnover kind of hurt them. Montgomery had 16 carries for 108 yards, so pretty efficient there. Again, I know with the interception, if you're a Bears fan, you just want Justin Fields to play. But I do think that Dalton probably gives him the best chance to win right now because he's not going to turn the ball over. Unfortunately, he did have the one. I think I was more shocked, even though the Rams have a good offense, I was more shocked at how bad the Bears defense looked because the Bears defense over the last couple of years has been a dominant defense. I mean, you allowed Matthew Stafford to just absolutely tear you up with 20 of 26, 321 yards, 3 TDs. He had an 89.9 quarterback rating, and that's a 0 from 100. He was, I think, the second highest QBR this week 1, just barely below Tom Brady. Darrell Henderson was able to run the ball, 16 carries for 70 yards and a touchdown. Just a very good game from the Los Angeles Rams. It's the reason why I thought that they would come out of the NFC and obviously even win the Super Bowl. That was my prediction. I just think that the Rams are so stacked on offense and defense. Like I said in that video, I think that the Rams, with Stafford specifically, as they start to win ball games, people will start to realize how great of a quarterback Matthew Stafford really is. And lastly, with the Ravens and Raiders on Monday Night Football, I think the Ravens obviously played well enough to win the ball game, but you got to give the Raiders credit. They were able to make some key drives late in order to give themselves a chance to win. Obviously, with that last drive with 40 seconds to put yourself in field goal range was very clutch. And then even the first drive in overtime, if you're Derek Carr, you definitely had a great ball right there on that interception. It's very unfortunate to get an interception with Lamar fumbling on the following possession and you able to, kind of redeem it and throw a touchdown there. Again, I think it's very good for Derek Carr. I don't understand why. I think a lot of Raiders fans, as well as John Gruden, is always trying to replace Derek Carr, but I think he's a very good quarterback. I think this is a very big win for the Raiders. This is a team that's been a fringe playoff team the last 2 years. I think they started 6-2 both years and kind of tailed off towards the end of the season. So again, you might see a hot start from them this year. But again, anytime you can get a big win against a team that could potentially, be a wild card team like the Ravens could be, it helps you in that tiebreaker scenario. So anytime you can beat teams that are potentially vying for a wild card spot, it's a huge deal. From the Ravens side, I think a lot of people are going to blow this loss out of proportion. It's just one loss. It's Monday Night Football, week 1 on the road. You played well enough to win. Unfortunately, the other team's offense made a couple of key drives late in order to make you lose that ball game. They already have a lot of injuries, so obviously with this team, you don't want, as the season goes on, for them to get some more significant injuries, because they're already kind of behind the 8 ball in that aspect, where they've already taken on so many injuries that, they're having to play with guys that they didn't think they would have to be starters right away. So that's going to do it for the week 1 recap. Obviously, this video might be a little long. Let me know what your thoughts are. Obviously, like I said, it's the very first week, so I'm trying to go over the games. Maybe I can just kind of leave out the stats and just kind of go over my initial thoughts on the game themselves to maybe shorten it, or maybe, I don't know, just let me know. Did you like watching the video this long? Did you feel it was maybe informative? Or what can I do to maybe make the videos better? But again, if you did get it this far, I appreciate you so much. Thank you for watching the video, and I look forward to watching the games for week 2 and then updating you guys on that as well. Thank you guys so much. Bye.